Are we seriously still calling big tech platforms private companies? I mean, seriously, how many times does the government have to either openly or in the black of night come out and tell the social media companies what to do and who to censor for them to finally be called what they are, government actors? Anyone who goes on about how they're private companies and can do whatever they want are playing at willful ignorance at this point, especially after the Joe Rogan controversy, in which the White House explicitly called upon Spotify to censor his podcast, and which Spotify happily obliged, removing over 100 of his episodes just over the past couple of days. They have not let up in the aftermath of this, and many other governments have also done similar things. It's not just the US government who calls for censorship on social media platforms only for it to just circumstantially happen in the aftermath. Oh, no. The Canadian government has been doing it just as vociferously, and just as recently as with the Canadian Convoy protest, in which there has been beautiful honking going on in Ottawa for about a week now. They have called upon GoFundMe to remove their donation webpage and prevent them from getting the $11 million that they were promised by backers who willingly gave their money to this peaceful protest organization, unlike BLM. And, well, GoFundMe obliged, removing the offending donation page, and after having their arm twisted by people calling for them to be sued, eventually giving back the funds in automatic donations to the people who supported, after initially trying to give it to reputable charities, I'm sure. And this has been a continual trend on the social media platforms among Silicon Valley giants. And not just that, it goes back even farther than that. The corporations, which have been continually called the scourge upon the people, big business, all of that sort of stuff, who have been manipulating the economy, causing all of the problems, have been continually, in fact, been manipulated by governments instead. If you look into most of these problems going back farther and farther into the past, you'll find that many of these companies were either funded directly by the government, told by the government to do what they did, which was so bad. Take the housing crisis, for example, where subprime mortgages was a government-sponsored policy, not a big corporation grift. And continually, you will find that it is also the government that is bailing them out of these things, which might make the response to some of the Silicon Valley's platforms quite contradictory, in that they are going after places like Google with antitrust lawsuits, which is kind of funny, because you'd expect that they'd only go after antitrust lawsuits for people that we're unhappy with. Well, that's only with a severe misunderstanding of what antitrust actually is, because you see, antitrust is about as antitrust as, let's say, the Patriot Act is patriotic, the Affordable Care Act is affordable, and any other act has anything to do with the name of said act. It turns out that the Antitrust Act does, in reality, mostly support monopolistic practices. Take Microsoft, for example. In 1995, you see, they were gone after by the government with an antitrust lawsuit. And you might have noticed that, well, it didn't exactly go anywhere, because in the aftermath of being hounded by this particular lawsuit, they simply started giving the government lobbying money in the form of a tax, as basically a form of tax, and then the big scary antitrust lawsuit went away, and the Microsoft has become ingrained upon the entire public consciousness and the market from henceforth, with, I'm sure, the government providing a bit of the moolah behind it. This goes even doubly for places like Google that have been funded by the American government to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars for literally decades at this point. And It is, of course, always worth to mention that it is the government that is pushing for much of the censorship that is going on these platforms, particularly on, as we've already stated, Spotify, where they have been pushing for Joe Rogan to have his podcast removed, but it also goes for places like Twitter, where they've had direct involvement in the censorship of COVID-19 policies as well, and I'm sure the same goes for YouTube and all sorts of other places. It's also worth it to mention that many of these platforms aren't even hiding the ball about the fact that they're at the government's beck and call for these particular policies. Just take YouTube, for example. In the explicit language of their medical misinformation policy, of which I have personally supposedly run afoul, they explicitly say that they are going to be following local health authorities. Read the government. They are only going to be censoring people based on the official government narrative, regardless of what the truth actually is, because they are government actors, not private companies, as many people, including on the right, would have you believe. These people are not running a private organization. They are running an organization that is inextricably tied to the government. They would not exist without the government. As I've already stated, they've been funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars each by the government, and they have continually shown that they are at the government's beck and call. This is not something that should be ignored, and is something that needs to be called out on a near daily basis by basically anyone who's interested, particularly in those who are interested in actually seeing new tech succeed. Because if you are interested in seeing those places succeed, having the government get more involved and stick their hands even more into the big tech mire is not what you want to be happening. You want to see them get out of these places altogether. Have them stop funding places like Google and YouTube and all of those sorts of places. Have them actually get their hands off of it, because when it's that point, they'll flounder and fall on their own, as the stock market and the now shrinking base of places like Facebook, I think, admirably shows. That's what needs to be done in order to actually have new tech succeed, and I, personally, want to see that happen, and that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. If you enjoyed that video, do subscribe down below, whether it be on BitChute, on Odyssey, on Brighteon, on Rumble. I have all of those places. I am also on Minds, Gab, and Getter. All of those links are down in the description. I suggest you go check them out. I'm KelKidman. This has been Breaking on the Daily. Don't be square.